Hello everyone, my name is Brianna Worthington and today we are going to be learning about the types of joints. So here's a brief joint classification. Joints are classified by tissue type, which is the fibrous, the cartilaginous, the synovial, and by the degree of the movement they allow, which is the synarthrosis, the amphiarthrosis, and the diarthrosis. So fibrous joints like skull sutures are typically immovable synarthrosis. Fibrous joints are bones that are held together by dense connective tissue. Cartilaginous joints, such as those between vertebrae, are slightly movable, which is considered amphiarthrosis. And cartilaginous joints are bones that are connected by the cartilage, such as like the fibrocartilage or the hyaline cartilage. And lastly, the synovial joints, like the knee, are freely movable, which is considered the diarthrosis. And the synovial joints are bones that are separated by a fluid-filled joint cavity. And over here we have a picture of the skull, the fibrous that has no movement, the cartilaginous, which is some movement, and then the synovial, which is full range of movement. And then we're going to be moving on to the fibrous joints. So fibrous joints are fixed joints where bones are connected by dense connective tissue, lacking a joint cavity and generally allowing little to no movement. There are three types, which are the sutures, which are found between the skull bones, the gomophoses, which anchor the teeth in their sockets, and syndesmosis, which connect parallel bones like the radius and ulna or the tibula and fibula. And more about these types of fibrous joints. So sutures. Sutures are located exclusively between the flat plate-like bones of the skull, which is the parental and the frontal bone. They're held together by short, dense fibrous tissue and allow very little to no movement, as we said before. They become increasingly immovable with age as the fibrous tissue can ossify over time. Fun fact about sutures, in newborns, they have some flexibility to accommodate brain growth and passage through the birth canal. This is by the fontanelle, which is the space between the bones of the skull in an infant or a fetus, where ossification is not complete and the suture is not fully formed. The main one is between the frontal and the parietal bone. Moving on to the gomophoses. So the gomophoses is a special peg and socket joint that anchors the roots of the teeth into their bony sockets in the jaw. The tooth is fastened in the sockets by the periodontal ligament, a type of fibrous tissue. This is considered an immovable joint, so the joints between the tooth of the mandible or the maxillobulbar. And then moving on to the syndesmosis. So syndesmosis are located where the two parallel bones are united by a band of fibrous tissue, which is the ligament, or a broad sheet of connective tissue called an interossous membrane. So examples of these include the radius and the ulna of the forearm, and the tibia and fibula in the leg, and allows for a slight amount of movement between the bones, unlike sutures and gomophoses. And then over here we have like a little picture of each one. And then moving on to the cartilaginous joints. So cartilaginous joints are joints that connect bones with cartilage, allowing for some movement. There are two types, which is the syntrosis, where bones are joined by hyaline cartilage, and symphysis, where they are joined by fibrocartilage. And examples include the epiphyseal plates, ingrowing long bones, and syndesmosis, and the pubic symphysis or intravertebral disc, which is the symphysis. And to learn more about these, so the syndesmosis, this is the primarily cartilage joints. The structure of this is bones that are united by a rigid bridge of hyaline cartilage. These are often temporary, especially those that serve as growth plates and may eventually ossify. Examples of these is the epiphyseal plates, growth plates, and long bones connecting the diaphysis and epiphysis. Also, these are located in the joints between the first rib and the sternum. Joints between certain skull bones, like the sphenooccipital syndrosis. And then the symphysis. This is the secondary cartilaginous joint. The structure of this are bones that are joined by fibrocartilage, which is a strong and flexible type of cartilage. These joints are slightly mobile. Examples of this is the pubic symphysis, which joins the left and right pubic bones. the intervertebral disc between the adjacent vertebrae, and the manubrosternum joint, the L joint, between the manubrin and the body of the sternum. And then here's a picture of both of them too, given little labels and highlights. And then moving on to the synovial joint structures. So the synovial joints are the most common joints in the body. A key structural characteristic for a synovial joint that is not seen at fibrous or cartilaginous joints is the presence of a joint cavity. This fluid-filled space is the site at which the articulating surface of the bones connect each other. At synovial joints, the articular surfaces of bones are covered with smooth articular cartilage. This gives the bones at synovial joint the ability to move smoothly against each other, allowing for increased joint mobility. So, to learn a little bit more about each of these parts, so the articular cartilage is a smooth white tissue covering the ends of the bones that form the joint and reduces friction and absorb the shock. And the joint capsule, where's we at? The joint capsule right here. So the joint capsule is a fibrous connective tissue that encloses the joint, and it has an outer layer, which is the fibrous membrane, and an inner layer, which is the synovial membrane. So a little more about the synovial membrane right over here. So the synovial membrane lines the inner layer of the joint capsule, produces synovial fluid and lubricating substance that reduces friction and nourishes the cartilage. The synovial fluid right here is a clear fluid that fills the joint cavity. It lubricates the joint as well and provides cushioning and nourishes the cartilage. The ligaments right here. So the ligament is a tough fibrous connective tissue that connects bones to bones. This provides stability and supports to the joint. And the compact bone, as well as right over here, the compact bone is a dense, hard outer layer of bones that provides strength and protection. The spongy bone right here, it helps reduce the overall weight of the skeleton. And the bone marrow as well over here plays a crucial role in production and storage of blood cells. And then as we move on, we're going to be talking about the synovial joint types. So synovial joints are the most common and complex type of joint in the human body, characterized by a fluid-filled joint cavity. They are classified into 6 of the base of the shape of their articulating surfaces and the movements they allow, which are hinge, saddle, planar, pivot, condyloid, and ball and socket joint. So starting off with ball and socket joint, the ball and socket joint, this is the type of joint that features the rounded head of one bone fitting into the cup-like socket of another. It provides the greatest range of motion, allowing for movement on all planes, including rotation. Examples of this is the hip and the shoulder joint. The hinge joint. So a hinge joint works like a door hinge, with the convex end of one bone fitting into the concave end of another. This structure allows for bending and straightening motions along a single axis. So examples of this is the elbow, the knee, and the finger joints. So moving on to the pivot joints. In a pivot joint, a rounded part of one bone is enclosed with a ring formed by another bone and ligament. This allows for a rotational movement around a single axis. So examples of this is the joint between the first and second cervical vertebrae that lets you turn your head, and the joint in the forearm that allows the palms to turn up and down. And then moving on to the condyloid joint, also known as a ellipsoid joint. The condyloid joint consists of an oval shaped end of one bone fitting into a similarly shaped depression of another. It permits movement into 2 planes, flexion, extension, and abduction, adduction, but does not allow full rotation. So examples is the radiocarpal joint of the wrist, and the knuckle joint of the hand. And then moving on to the saddle joint. The saddle joint is named for its shape, where both articulating surfaces are convex in one direction and concave in the other, fitting together like a saddle and a rider. This allows for a biaxial movement with a greater range of motion than a condyloid joint. So examples of this is the carpometacarpal joint at the base of the thumb, which makes the thumb opposable. And then last but not least, we have the plane joint, also called gliding joint. This type has flat or slightly curved surfaces that allow bones to slide over to each other. So the motion is typically small and is limited by ligaments. So examples of this is the joints between the carpal bones of the wrist and the tarsal bones of the foot. And then over here we have like the demonstration of all the different kind of joints going in all the directions that they go in. And then last but not least, we have a review. So we have number 1, what is true about fibrous joints? A fluid-filled cavity is present. B, it's immobile or very limited movement. Or C, cartilage, hyaline, or fibrocartilage. If you picked B, then you are correct, because remember that A is synovial and C is cartilaginous. And then we have 2, which is synovial joints have how many different types? A5, B6, or C7. If you selected B, then you were correct, because remember we have hinge, saddle, plantar, pivot, condyloid, and ball and socket joint. And then 3, we have the cartilaginous joints are freely movable joints that allow for a full range of motion. True or false? If you select B, false, that is correct, because remember it's cartilaginous joints, they're kind of movable but not freely movable as synovial joints. So just keep that in mind. But that is it for my slides. I hope everyone enjoyed and learned as much as they could. And thank you.